There is a place on this planet where the sun has never reached. Not darkness like a room with the lights off. Darkness like the concept of light never existed. A void so complete, so absolute, that the animals living there have spent millions of years evolving ways to exist without ever seeing anything. The pressure down here is 300 times what you feel right now. It would collapse your lungs instantly, crush your sinuses, force nitrogen into your blood until your joints feel like they're being torn apart from the inside. No human has ever survived unprotected at this depth. Our best submarines struggle to hold together long enough to take readings before retreating back toward the surface. And yet, right now, somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a 50-ton animal is down here, awake, hunting, moving through the dark like it owns it. Because it does. The sperm whale is the deepest diving predator on Earth. It holds its breath for over an hour. It generates sounds louder than a jet engine. It has the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. It raises its young in tight family units, teaches them language, and passes down knowledge across generations the way humans pass down culture. It is, by almost every biological rule we have, impossible. And that's the thing. When you actually sit down and look at what a sperm whale is, what it does, how it does it, what's happening inside its body every single time it dives, you stop seeing an animal. You start seeing something that evolution had absolutely no business building. This is the story of how it got here, what it actually is, and why, against everything we understand about biology, it exists at all. Let's start with a problem. You are a warm-blooded mammal. You breathe air. Your body runs on oxygen, and when that oxygen runs out, you have somewhere between 4 and 6 minutes before your brain starts shutting down permanently. Now dive. Not 10 meters, not 50, not the depth of a recreational scuba diver with tanks and a regulator and a safety line back to the surface, 3,000 meters, nearly 2 miles straight down, on a single breath. This is what a sperm whale does, routinely, multiple times a day, like it's nothing, and the deeper you go, the worse it gets, because pressure doesn't increase gradually, it stacks. At 10 meters, you're already feeling twice the pressure of the surface. At 100, it's 10 times. By the time you're at 3,000 meters, the force bearing down on every square inch of your body is roughly 4,400 pounds. When a sperm whale dives, it doesn't fight the pressure. It surrenders to it. The rib cage is built differently from almost any other mammal on Earth. The ribs aren't rigidly attached. They flex. They fold inward as the pressure mounts, allowing the lungs to compress and eventually collapse almost entirely. What sounds like catastrophic injury is actually the solution. A collapsed lung releases no air into the bloodstream. No air means no nitrogen dissolving into the blood. No nitrogen means no bends. The whale essentially trades one problem for another, and the trade works perfectly. But if the lungs collapse, where does the oxygen come from? This is where it gets strange. Sperm whales store oxygen, not in their lungs, but in their blood and muscle tissue directly. Their blood contains hemoglobin concentrations far beyond what we see in humans, binding and holding oxygen at a density that would be medically alarming in any land animal. And their muscles are packed with a protein called myoglobin, which stores oxygen directly in the tissue itself. So much of it that sperm whale muscle isn't red like most mammal muscle. It's almost black. Every fiber of a sperm whale's body is a battery, charged at the surface, discharged slowly over the course of a dive that can last more than an hour. Then there's the heart. At the surface, a sperm whale's heart beats around 60 times per minute. Normal for an animal its size. But the moment it starts descending, something shifts. The heart begins to slow. Not because something is wrong, because the whale is making a calculation. Oxygen is finite. The brain needs it most. So the body begins rationing. By depth, the heart is beating fewer than 10 times per minute. Think about that. 10 beats. The whale is not dying. It is not in distress. It has deliberately dialed its own cardiovascular system down to the absolute minimum required to keep the critical systems running, redirecting blood almost entirely to the brain and the muscles powering the dive. Everything else, digestion, immune response, peripheral circulation, goes dormant. The animal is partially shutting itself down, on purpose, to survive a world that should be fatal. And when it's done, when the hunt is over and the prey is caught or lost, it turns around and swims back up. 2 miles, still on that same breath, breaks the surface, exhales a plume of mist 10 meters into the air, takes a few breaths, and then does it again. No decompression stop, no recovery period, no damage. If a human engineer sat down and tried to design an air-breathing mammal capable of doing this, they would fail. The constraints are too contradictory, the physics too unforgiving, and yet evolution, over millions of years of trial and error, arrived at a solution so elegant it looks almost deliberate. The sperm whale isn't just adapted to the deep, it was built for it. Now let's talk about the head, because if the body is strange, the head is something else entirely. A sperm whale's head makes up roughly 1/3 of its total body length. On a full-grown male, that's 9 meters, nearly 30 feet, just head. It is the single most disproportionate feature of any large animal on Earth, and for a long time, nobody really understood why. From the outside, it looks blunt, almost unfinished, like evolution ran out of ideas halfway through and just left a wall of flesh where a face should be. Sailors who saw it emerging from fog in the 1700s didn't think mammal. They thought sea devil. They thought the ocean itself had grown a fist. They weren't entirely wrong about what it was capable of. Inside that head is an organ called the spermaceti, a massive structure packed with up to a ton of waxy, translucent oil unlike anything else found in nature. When whalers first discovered it, they thought it was the whale's reproductive fluid, hence the name. It wasn't. What it actually is took us another century to figure out. It's a sound weapon. Deep in the whale's nasal passages, air is forced past a structure called the monkey lips, a pair of dense fatty valves that clap together to generate a click. That click travels into the spermaceti organ, which acts as an acoustic lens, focusing and amplifying the sound before firing it forward in a directional beam. The result is a click registering at 230 decibels. To put that in context, a jet engine at full throttle produces around 140 decibels. A gunshot is 160. The threshold for instant hearing damage in humans is 130. At 230 decibels, we are not talking about loud sound anymore. We are talking about a pressure wave, a physical force moving through water. Divers who have been close to a clicking sperm whale describe feeling it pass through their chest like a punch, not hearing it, feeling it. And the whale fires this thousands of times a day, not randomly, with surgical precision. Each click sent forward into the dark, bouncing off whatever lies ahead, returning as an echo that the whale's brain processes in real time into a 3-dimensional map of its environment. Shape, size, distance, density, movement, all of it reconstructed from sound alone, in complete darkness, at depth. This is echolocation, but calling it that almost undersells it. Bats echolocate. Dolphins echolocate. What sperm whales do is closer to active sonar, military grade. The kind of spatial resolution their clicks can achieve at depth would embarrass most human technology, and they need every bit of it. Because where they hunt is not a place that forgives mistakes. 3,000 meters below the surface, the ocean becomes a different planet. Sunlight dies at around 200 meters. Below that is what scientists call the twilight zone. Just enough light to cast shadows, not enough to see by. Below 1,000 meters, even that is gone. What remains is a blackness so total it has its own name, the midnight zone, a permanent pressurized dark that covers more of Earth's surface than all the land on the planet combined. The temperature here hovers just above freezing. The pressure, as we've already established, is enough to destroy machinery not specifically engineered to survive it. The seafloor in some parts of this zone hasn't seen light since before multicellular life existed, and this is where sperm whales go to eat. Not occasionally, not as a last resort when food is scarce near the surface. This is their primary hunting ground, the place they have spent millions of years evolving specifically to reach. They dive into it dozens of times a day, navigating by sound through absolute darkness, chasing prey that in some cases is larger and more powerful than almost anything else in the ocean. Because the midnight zone isn't empty. It is full of things that evolved in isolation, cut off from sunlight, shaped entirely by pressure and cold and the eternal dark. Creatures with no eyes, or eyes the size of dinner plates. Animals that produce their own light, dangling it in front of their mouths as bait. Squid the size of cars. Fish with teeth too large for their mouths to close around. The most prized of all of these, the prey that sperm whales will dive the deepest and stay the longest to catch, is the giant squid, the largest invertebrate on Earth. Arms that can stretch beyond 10 meters, suckers ringed with hooks sharp enough to carve permanent scars into whale skin inches deep. Eyes the size of footballs, the largest eyes of any animal alive, evolved specifically to detect the faint bioluminescence of a predator descending from above. We have never witnessed a live giant squid hunt in full. The depths where it happens are too extreme, too dark, too crushing for cameras or divers or submarines to reliably reach. What we know about these encounters comes almost entirely from the scars left on sperm whales and the squid beaks found dissolving in their stomachs. But the scars tell a story. Some sperm whales carry suction cup marks across their entire heads. Rings of scar tissue 30 centimeters across, dozens of them, layered over years of battles fought in total darkness at the bottom of the world. These aren't the marks of easy kills. They are the marks of a fight between two animals, each one a legitimate monster by any measure, locked together in the dark miles below anything that breathes air. And the whale wins. Not always, but enough. It descends on a single breath, navigates by sound, finds something enormous and dangerous in total darkness, subdues it, and then swims back to the surface in time to breathe. Every single day. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Sperm whales are not just the deepest diving predator on Earth. They are not just the loudest animal on Earth. They are, by a significant margin, the owner of the largest brain that has ever existed on this planet. 6 times larger than a human brain, heavier than your head entire. A structure so metabolically expensive that simply maintaining it consumes an enormous portion of the animal's daily energy budget. Evolution does not build things that cost that much for no reason. Every gram of brain tissue has to justify its existence, which means something is using all of that. The question is what? For a long time, scientists assumed the bulk of it was devoted to processing sound, and part of it is the regions of a sperm whale brain dedicated to acoustic processing are unlike anything seen in other animals. Vast, elaborate, designed to handle the constant flood of echolocation data coming back from those 230 decibel clicks, translating raw echo into three-dimensional spatial maps in real time. But that doesn't account for all of it, not even close. Sperm whales communicate using sequences of clicks called coders, not the echolocation clicks used for hunting. Different clicks, slower, more deliberate, structured in patterns that repeat with enough consistency that researchers began cataloging them decades ago. Short bursts of sound, rhythmic, almost percussive, like a code being tapped out in the dark, which is essentially what it is. The patterns are distinct, recognizable. And here's where it starts to get genuinely unsettling. Different groups of sperm whales use different coders. Whales in the Caribbean click differently from whales off the coast of Japan. Pods that travel together develop shared patterns, signature sequences that identify them to other groups across miles of open ocean. This is not instinct. Calves are not born knowing their clan's coders. They learn them by listening, by mimicking, by practicing, imperfectly at first, then with increasing accuracy until the pattern is theirs, until they sound like home. That is culture, not metaphorically, not loosely. In the strict anthropological sense of the word, knowledge and behavior that exists not in the genes, but in the community, passed from one generation to the next through learning. Sperm whales have culture, and it goes deeper than that. In 2021, a group of researchers launched something called the Earth Species Project. The goal was straightforward in concept and staggering in ambition. Use artificial intelligence to analyze thousands of hours of recorded sperm whale clicks and find the patterns that human ears and human math had missed. What they found was not a simple signaling system, not a fixed set of calls with fixed meanings. The way a bird alarm call works or a wolf howl carries territorial information. What they found was complexity, layered, combinatorial complexity. Coders that seem to combine and modify each other, patterns within patterns, structure that suggested not just communication, but something closer to grammar, rules governing how elements could be arranged to create different meanings. Some researchers believe sperm whale coders may have syntax. If that's true, and we are not there yet, the research is ongoing. The picture is still incomplete. But if it's true, it would mean sperm whales aren't just communicating, they are speaking. In the fullest sense of the word, a language with structure, with rules, with the capacity to generate combinations that have never been said before. Think about what that means. An animal with a brain 6 times the size of ours, living in a world we cannot enter. Speaking in a language we are only now beginning to realize is a language at all. And they have been doing this in one form or another for at least 15 million years, long before our species existed. Long before the first human being looked up at the sky and tried to find words for what they saw. Whatever sperm whales have been saying to each other across the dark and the deep for 15 million years, we have heard none of it. There's one more piece to this, because it's not just what they say, it's what they do when they encounter something new. Divers who have entered the water near sperm whale pods describe something that is difficult to explain without sounding like you're exaggerating. The whale detects you immediately. You are acoustically transparent to it, your lungs and ribs and heartbeat visible in its sonar like an X-ray. It knows exactly what you are and exactly what you are not. And then it comes closer, not aggressively, Not fleeing, it orients toward you, tilts its body to read the echoes at a different angle, and begins clicking in patterns that sound, and researchers have noted this carefully and with appropriate scientific caution, conversational, like it's saying something and waiting, like it's asking a question and genuinely curious whether you're capable of answering. Sometimes, when divers have mimicked the clicks back, the whale responds, changes its pattern, adjusts, engages. These are not coincidences. These are interactions between an animal that has had complex communication for 15 million years and a species that invented language roughly 100,000 years ago and has spent most of that time assuming it was alone in possessing it. We hunted sperm whales for centuries. We rendered them for oil. We drove them to the edge of extinction. And when we finally enter their world quietly, without weapons, just curious, they don't flee. They don't attack. They turn around. They try to understand us. Sperm whales do not live alone. They never have. Even in the deepest, most remote stretches of ocean, where food is scarce and the nearest coastline is 1,000 miles away, sperm whales move through the world in groups. Tight, stable, multi-generational family units that stay together not because they have to, but because they chose to, over and over, across decades. And at the center of every group is an older female, the matriarch. She carries more than age. She carries a map that no instrument has ever been able to read, a lifetime of accumulated knowledge about a world with no landmarks, no roads, no visible features, just water in every direction as far as existence goes. She knows where the deep water canyons are, where the squid gather in certain seasons, where the water runs warm enough in winter to raise a calf safely. And the pod follows her the way you follow someone who has been somewhere you haven't and knows things you don't yet. The migrations these pods make are inherited. Roots passed down from grandmother to mother to calf across generations. Lines carved through open ocean that trace feeding grounds established before most human civilizations existed. Warm water nurseries, ancient corridors through the deep, where squid have gathered for thousands of years. The matriarch doesn't discover these places. She was brought to them as a calf by her own mother, who was brought by hers. This knowledge exists only in memory, in the minds of animals with no hands, no tools, no way to record anything except by passing it directly from one generation to the next, alive, embodied, continuous. When a matriarch dies, that knowledge dies with her. The routes she knew, the feeding grounds she remembered, the safe passages through a changing ocean, gone. Her pod doesn't just lose a leader, they lose their library. Researchers studying populations heavily targeted by whalers in the 19th and 20th centuries found something devastating in the data. Pods that lost their oldest females didn't just shrink, they became disoriented. Migration patterns fragmented. Calf mortality rose. The loss of one animal cascaded through the entire group across years, sometimes decades. We didn't just hunt sperm whales, we deleted their memory. But the influence of a sperm whale reaches far beyond its pod. Every time a whale dives thousands of meters to hunt and returns to the surface to breathe, it carries nutrients with it. Iron especially, pulled from deep water and brought up into the sunlit zone where phytoplankton can use it. At the surface, the whale defecates, enormous iron-rich plumes that trigger phytoplankton blooms measurable from space. Phytoplankton produce roughly half the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. They are the base of almost every marine food chain and absorb carbon dioxide at a scale that influences global climate. Sperm whales, by moving vertically through the water column, thousands of times a year, act as a biological pump, keeping the whole system running. A single whale can stimulate carbon capture equivalent to thousands of trees. Before industrial whaling reduced their numbers by an estimated 80%, the collective pump they operated was one of the most significant carbon capture mechanisms on the planet. We dismantled it without knowing it existed, and even in death, the work continues. When a sperm whale dies, it sinks, slowly at first, then faster. A 50-ton animal descending through 3,000 meters of water, coming to rest on the seafloor in permanent dark. Within hours, scavengers arrive from miles away. Hagfish, sleeper sharks, crabs, eels strip the soft tissue first, then the bones. Specialized worms bore directly into the skeleton, dissolving it from the inside. Bacteria colonize what remains, creating sulfide-rich environments that support entire communities of organisms found nowhere else on Earth. A single whale fall can sustain a deep-sea ecosystem for 100 years. The same animal that shaped its family, navigated its ocean, fertilized its waters, and hunted its depths continues doing work long after it's gone. The ocean had spent millions of years learning to depend on these animals, and when we stripped them from it, we didn't just remove a species. We broke a system that had been running longer than we've existed. For most of human history, sperm whales were myth. Sailors in the 1700s crossed oceans in wooden ships, and occasionally something would happen they couldn't explain. A sound rising from below, loud rhythmic knocking, like something massive hammering against the hull from underneath, and then, emerging from the water ahead, a 15-meter wall of flesh, exhaling a plume of mist that caught the light wrong. They called them sea devils, leviathans, and the fear made sense. When you're standing on a wooden deck in the middle of the Atlantic with no land in any direction, and something that large surfaces close enough to feel the displacement of water, terror is the reasonable response. But then someone realized what was inside that head. Spermaceti oil didn't smoke when it burned. It didn't freeze in winter. It lubricated the precision machinery of the early industrial revolution better than any alternative, and lit city streets brighter and cleaner than anything else available. In an era before petroleum, before electricity, it was the most valuable biological substance on Earth. And so, an entire industry was built around finding and killing them. Whaling ships left New England ports traveling for 2 or 3 years at a time. The hunts were brutal. Harpoons weren't instantly fatal. Whales thrashed for hours, the ocean turning red around them. The distress calls they made carried for miles underwater, and the rest of the pod heard them. Mothers positioned themselves between boats and their calves. Some fought back, but they couldn't outrun ships, and they couldn't survive harpoons. And with females reproducing only once every 5 to 7 years, populations had no way to absorb the losses. The fear became legend in 1820, when the whaling ship Essex was rammed and sunk by a sperm whale in the middle of the Pacific. Deliberately, twice. The crew spent months adrift. Some resorted to cannibalism. Melville heard those stories and wrote Moby Dick, not as fantasy, but as reckoning. The white whale wasn't a monster. It was an animal that had learned ships meant death and decided to fight back. We responded by hunting harder. By the early 20th century, populations had collapsed across most of their historical range. Estimates suggest we killed over 1 million sperm whales across 3 centuries. The global whaling moratorium came in 1986, late, but just in time for the species to pull back from the edge. Numbers have slowly recovered since, not to what they were, but enough that they're no longer on the immediate edge of disappearing. They survived, barely, carrying whatever memory and language and knowledge managed to survive with them. We nearly erased an animal we had never understood, and in doing so, damaged a system we didn't even know existed. So let's come back to the question: why shouldn't sperm whales exist? Because everything about them violates the boundaries we use to define what's possible for a living thing. They are warm-blooded mammals that conquered a world built to destroy warm-blooded mammals. They collapse their own lungs on purpose. They run their hearts at 10 beats per minute. They store oxygen in their muscles like fuel in a tank and descend into crushing darkness on a single breath, dozens of times a day, for their entire lives. Their heads are a third of their body. They generate sound louder than anything else alive and use it to see in a world with no light. They have the largest brain ever to exist on this planet, and they've been using it in ways we're only beginning to understand for 15 million years. They raise their young in families held together by the memory of older females. They teach their children language. They fertilize the ocean they swim through and feed ecosystems they'll never see from the depths of their own bodies after they die. They are, in the most literal sense, part of what keeps this planet running. And yet for centuries, the only thing we wanted from them was the oil in their heads. There's something that stays with you when you spend time with this animal on paper, in research, in the accounts of the few people who have entered the water near them and come back changed. It's not just the scale, or the biology, or the strangeness of it. It's the gap, the distance between what we assumed these animals were and what they actually are. We assumed they were resources. It turned out they were societies. We assumed their sounds were noise. It turned out they might be language. We assumed that when we entered their world, they would either flee or attack. Instead, they came closer, tilted their heads, and clicked in patterns that sounded to the people who heard them like questions. An animal that has every biological right to be indifferent to us, that we hunted to the edge of extinction, that exists in a world we cannot enter and barely understand, choosing, when it encounters us, to be curious. We don't fully know what sperm whales are. We don't know what they say to each other, or what they remember, or what, if anything, they make of the strange, hairless mammals that occasionally appear at the boundary of their world and stare down into the dark. But they're down there right now, diving, clicking, navigating oceans by sound in complete darkness, feeding ecosystems that won't exist without them, carrying knowledge in their memories that has no copy anywhere else on Earth. The most alien intelligence on this planet isn't somewhere out in space. It's 3,000 meters below the surface, and it's been there a lot longer than we have.